Asa Mike Nave was born on May 19, 1870 in Baxter County, Missouri, to Allen Maynard Nave and Martha Elizabeth Weaver. He was the oldest of 8 children. In 1880, they were living on a farm in Big Flat, Arkansas. He moved to Indian Territory in 1888. By 1894, he was living in Enterprise, Indian Territory. During this time, he would drive cattle from Texas to the railhead. Most likely he trailed them on the Shawnee Trail. This was the only route they would have taken him along with cattle near Fayetteville, Arkansas. The Shawnee Trail was also known as the Texas Road, the Sedalia Trail, or the Kansas Trail. In those days, there were 4 major cattle trails out of Texas. The Shawnee was the oldest and the easternmost. It came from South Texas and ended in Sedalia, Missouri. This route would slowly die out when the Chisholm Trail became the most used, but not before Asa met the love of his life. A story told by his daughter Lily tells of how Asa met his wife. Asa Mike Nave was the cowboy who trailed cattle during the 1890s from Texas to the railhead. While on a cattle drive, he saw Amanda Jane watching the cattle drive while standing in front of her house near Fayetteville, Arkansas. Being smitten by her, he roped her with his lasso, and they were married on July 21st, 1894. While the marriage license was issued on July 21st, they weren't married until August 20th. It was a double wedding with Amanda's brother Charles and his wife Cora Waters. Ace and Amanda would have 13 children together. Their firstborn would be John Allen, born on June 7, 1895 in Enterprise, Indian Territory. William Jasper came on April 15, 1897. Floyd came in 1900 in Indian Territory. Daughter Lily Mae would come on November 25, 1901 in Scipio, Indian Territory. Cecil Roy would follow on January 27, 1903. His mother, Martha Elizabeth, would pass away on January 21, 1905 in Scipio, Indian Territory. Jewel Edger would come less than a month later on February 13, 1905. On March 2, 1907, Florence Iva would be born. July 13, 1909, would see the birth of their first set of twins, Willis Maynard and Willis Ace. Willis Maynard would be known to the family as white, and Willis Ace would be known as black. According to the 1910 U.S. federal census, Asa and his family were living in Brook and Haskell, Oklahoma. He rented the farm they lived on. He would also employ his eldest 3 sons. Margaret Elizabeth would be born on September 2, 1911 in Scipio, Oklahoma. On May 18, 1914, they would welcome their second set of twins, Paul and Pauline. On March 7, 1918, Willis Maynard would pass away from either smallpox or a snake bite. He would be buried in Hilo Cemetery in Scipio. In 1920, Asa would again rent the farm his family lived on in Scipio. Their last child would be Charles Henry, born on March 4, 1920. His father, Allen Maynard, would pass away on May 2, 1929, in Scipio. In 1930, Asa would be renting the farm which his family lived on. In 1940, Asa and Amanda would be living in Bucklusky, Oklahoma. Asa and Amanda would live near Arpaler at the end of his life. A grandson remembers the beautiful flowers at their home. He said that Amanda was very particular and strict about the flower garden, and Asa made sure that the flowers were taken care of. Asa would pass away on November 30th, 1947 in McAlester, Oklahoma. He was 77. The McAlester News Capital, McAlester, Oklahoma, Monday, December 1st, 1947. Arpela. A.M. Nave, 77-year-old Arpela resident, died in a McAlester hospital Sunday afternoon following a long illness. Survivors include his widow, Mrs. Manda Nave, of Arpela, 7 sons, J.A. Nave of Arpaler, J.W. Nave of Monument, New Mexico, Floyd Nave of Weaverville, California, Cecil Nave of McAllister, and Willie Nave, Paul Nave, and Charles Nave, all of Corcoran, California. 5 daughters, Mrs. Lily Cathy, Mrs. Pauline Stewart, and Mrs. Iva Cathy, all of Corcoran, Mrs. Jewel Williamson of Scipio, and Mrs. Margaret Emerton of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. 2 brothers, Oliver Nave of Scipio and Roy Nave of Corcoran, and his sister, Mrs. Mary Walker of Scipio. Funeral arrangements are incomplete and will be announced later by Humphrey Funeral Home, McAllister. The Daily Oklahoma, Saturday, December 6, 1947. McAllister, December 5th. Services for A.M. Nave, 77, pioneer resident of Arpaler, who died in McAllister Hospital earlier this week, were Friday at Hilo Cemetery. Nave was born May 9, 1870, in Baxter County, Missouri, and moved to Oklahoma in 1888. Survivors include his wife, 7 sons, J.A. Nave of Arpaler, J.W. of Monument, New Mexico, Floyd of Weaverville, California, Cecil of McAllister, and Willie, Paul, and Charles, all of Corcoran, California. 5 daughters, Mrs. Lily Cathy, Mrs. Iva Cathy, and Mrs. Pauline Stewart, all of Corcoran, California. Mrs. Jewel Williamson of Scipio, and Mrs. Margaret Emerton of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. 2 brothers, Oliver Nave of Scipio and Roy Nave of Corcoran, California. A sister, Mrs. Mary Walker of Scipio. 62 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren.